The next sample is a buttonhole foot to work a series of 5 buttonholes in a straight line on folded fabric, correct length for the button, and the button must be attached. So I've got my button, I've got my buttonhole foot. I'm going to be marking with pencil so that you can see what I'm doing, but it is advised to use a chalk pencil so it does rub off easily. So first things first, I'm going to pop on my buttonhole foot. So I'm just unclipping my standard foot and then my buttonhole foot will go in place. I'm sliding it under, working out which is the front and which is the back. So on this one, the front has the three markers, and also if you're unsure, pop your foot on either way and then slowly bring your needle down and into towards the foot, and you'll be able to see whether your needle will go straight in through the hole or whether it'll hit the white piece. So this machine does a manual buttonhole. I'm going to show you how to do a manual buttonhole. If you've got an automatic buttonhole setting, then that's even easier. So I'll show you how to line all your buttons up and to get ready to go to sew. And I've got some information about the automatic buttonholes so that you can see the different types of feet and the settings of how you can put your button into the back of the foot and bring your buttonhole sensor down so it measures your buttonhole, it measures your button for your buttonhole and stitches at the same time. So if in the meantime I get a chance to use a automatic buttonhole, I'll do another little video so that you can see. But at this point it would be the same, so you'd measure up in the same way, you'd put it in and you'd set to your automatic buttonhole that you wanted to. So there'll be probably a variety of different shapes, so choose the one that you want to do and make sure that when it's lined up, you know if the buttonhole's going to go if the fabric is going to go forwards or backwards first. So I always just do a little sample first so that you can see. Right, so if we get back to the fabric, so the foot's on, I've got my fabric, so it is just another piece that is 20, this one is 20 by 10, it's maybe just a little bit longer than that, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half. So when you're attaching a button, you usually have a facing or a buttonhole stand which is finished. So your buttonholes are one of the last things that you'll do on a garment. So that's that set up. Now I want to decide where I want my buttons to sit. So I'm going to go, so I'm just going to line up where I want my buttons to sit when they come through the buttonholes. So I'm going to mark where I want my buttons to be. And then I want 5 buttonholes. Five. So I'm going to attach my actual button at the top. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So I know that they're all 1 centimetre away from the fold. So 1 centimetre away from the fold. That's going to be the middle where I want my button to be. So that's going to be the middle of my buttonhole. And I know now where they're going to sit. So I'm working out. They're 1 inch. They're 1.5 inches away from each other. And they sit just on. So I can see now. So that's where my button's going to attach. So for my sample, so I'm going to attach my button there. And then I'm going to have my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttonholes there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my button. So I want my stitching to be either side. So I'm just drawing either side of the button so I can get my measurement. So I know the marker that I've just drawn in is going to be the centre. So now I'm just going to go ahead and straighten them off. So that's where I want my buttonhole to start. And again, don't use pencil because you'll see it. Whereas if you use your chalk, you won't see it. Or it'll rub off. So the shape that's created is like a H or a capital I shape. Capital H, capital I. And so it marks where the beginning and the end of the buttonhole is going to be, and then across the middle. So I've got 5 there, double check. So you need to have 5 in a row. If you want to have a go at practicing just 1 before you go on to do the 5, then that is up to you. So the first thing now, so I'm all set up, I've got everything lined up. If you do want to put a little bit of interlining in between, that's fine. I've got the medium weight calico and it's quite stiff anyway with calico, so I'm happy with how mine is sitting. What I'm gonna do first is line up and just see which way the foot goes. So on my machine, we have the stitch selector over here. And so you've got all your letters, which are your different stitches. And then you have this red box here that says 1, 2, 4, and 3. So number 1 is stitching the left side. Number 2 and 4 is stitching the top and the bottom of the buttonhole. And number 3 is stitching the right hand side. Then across to my stitch length, there is also a red box just in between 1 and 0, and that will determine the width, the length between each zigzag. So you probably want it more towards the 0 than to the 1, but you'll have to just run a bit of a sample material through to find out and get your stitch in the right place. So I'm just going to put the dial in the middle, just for a sample to see if it's going forward. So number 1 is just coming forward like it would a normal sewing machine. So I'm just going to run it down just so I can see the stitch. So I'm happy with how close that's going, and then if I'm just going to, while the needle's out, I'm just going to flick it across to do my wide stitch at the bottom. Oh, it's not quite, it wasn't quite on the, there we go. So the wide stitch, you maybe want to go in and out 6 times, and always change the dial when your needle's out of the fabric, else it can damage it. And so now I'm on 3. And number 3 is the right hand side, and that's actually now going backwards. So the foot should hold the material in place, so all you need to do is guide it. So I'll just show you my little sample. So I'm happy with how it's looking. So we've got just there, so you've got the left hand stitch that came forward, you've got the wider stitch that goes across at the bottom, and then you've got the right hand side stitch that goes backwards, and obviously you'd finish that top bit off with a large zigzag, same as the bottom. So I'm going to go for it. I'm going to have a practice now on my sample pieces. So I know it's going to come forward first, so I'm going to move the metal foot forward, and I'm going to line up the starting point. So the H nearest the fold, that's my starting point. My thread's caught up, there we go. So that's the starting point. So where this red arrow is on the side, I'm going to line that up with the start, so that the start and the end, so you can see, if I just get a little bit closer, so you can see, no you can't see because the light's on, let me just switch the light off. So if you can see inside the H shape, let me just line it up and show you again without breaking the camera. So I'm lining up the end of the foot, so the red line at the end, with the end of my buttonhole. So I want the H shape to fit inside. If I change it back to 1, so I'm just going to move the camera again. So if you can see inside, just trying to get it in so you can't see it. So you can see the H shape. So the longer, the straight line piece is right at the top, and then the straight line piece is in line with the red line at the bottom. So I'll get the foot off in a minute and show you a little bit better than that, but I'm just going to have a go at my first buttonhole so that you can see. So I'm on setting number 1, which is my first straight line, so I'm going to run that straight down. I'm just running this last bit by hand so that I can see that I'm hitting the line and I'm in the right place. So now I'm changing it to the wider zigzag, which is the 2 to 4, and I'm going to do that a couple of times. And then up then to 3, which is going to take me backwards. So the groove in the foot keeps everything aligned. And that's buttonhole number 1 done. Now I'm not going to cut until I've finished and lined up all my buttonholes. So if I just show you, I've got another foot that I can just show you without the light or the machine getting in the way. Here's one I made earlier. So you're aiming when you put your buttonhole foot on is the red line at the bottom would be in line with the bottom line, and your arrow at the top is in line with the top line. So then as you sew in, the presser foot, the feed dog will move the foot back and will keep stitching until, and then it'll keep stitching until you get your dial to the bottom, and then it'll stop because it's touched that bar at the front. It should stop, and then you know it's time to do your zigzag and then to come backwards back to where you started originally. So that's the foot for your manual buttonhole. So I'm going to line up the same again. Just a little check there. So I'm going to line up the same again and go for buttonhole number 2 and hope that it all gets lined up again. Number 2. Might have gone just slightly closer on that one, but we'll see what they look like at the end. So you should be aiming for the T shape, the zigzag to be at the wide zigzag to be at this, so this side of the line, and at this there's wider zigzag up here on this side of the line, because obviously that's where we measured the width and the length of the button. So once you get going, you do get into a rhythm with the buttonholes. So long as they're all lined up, each one just gets better. So let's have a look. So there's definitely room for improvement, but that one is slightly smaller and that one's maybe gone over a little bit. But they look very neat. I'm happy with how they look. In reflection, I would decide straight away where I'm lining everything up and stick to it. And practice definitely makes perfect. So rather than avoid things that are scary, go for it. And I know that once you've spent a long time making up a garment, to then put buttonholes in and cut across is very daunting. But if you get them lined up and you're happy with them, then that's fine. So this is the point on a garment or a product that you was making. This is the point where you would decide if you are happy enough with the buttonholes to then cut into and make the holes. Because once you've cut the holes, there is little to no turning back. So I'm happy with how they look. They're neat enough for me, neat enough for a sample. And once the buttons were in there, they'll definitely do the job. So if you cut in, you want your unpicker, and so you'll put a pin in at one side, and then you'll get your unpicker and you run your unpicker through. So you're going to go in from your zigzag and cut up to. So make sure you've got a nice sharp unpicker. You can use snips, but it's not as easy. So I'm just gonna use the unpicker now just to get into the edge to make sure that that's all covered. And then moment of truth, does the button fit? Yes, the button does fit. Very good. So just push it through a couple of times and then you'll get your frayed edges. If they're going to come away, they'll come away now and you can just snip them and get rid of them. If there's any loose bits there. that needs cutting off, because you've obviously got the bit in the middle that frays. So that's the front of the button where I've marked it, and I'm pushing that button through and it goes through. Happy with that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do the next one. So I'm going to put my pin through. Get my unpicker. Go straight in and up towards the pin. So the pin's there so you don't cut straight through all of your material. So don't skip putting a pin in, no matter how confident you are. Anything can happen. So I think this one might be a little bit too small. It is maybe on the smaller side, this one, but the button's going through. So with a bit of wear, that will be okay. So on to the next one. Pin again. Cut through. Get right into your stitch at each side. And push then your button through. So that's all the buttonholes marked up, and I'm going to stitch my button on the top, and that sample is now complete.